the very first small step you can take as a teacher is to really decide if you want to invest time and effort in further improving your support of your students' self-regulated learning. As with any change, small and big, nothing really happens unless you've made it your deliberate goal. So really make the decision, and once you've made up your mind, you can take 4 steps to engage your students in self-regulated learning. The first step is to understand what self-regulated learning is all about. Self-regulated learning is interpreted in many different ways. So take the time and reflect about what you think self-regulated learning is. By making self-regulated learning as concrete as possible, it makes it much easier to focus your support and to watch your students' growth. Now that you have activated your own prior knowledge, it's time to broaden your horizon. Go and have a look what science has to say about self-regulated learning. One scientific model that you could consult is this model of Barry Zimmerman. This model makes self-regulated learning more concrete by translating it into 21 self-regulated learning skills. Now, don't worry, you don't have to become an expert in all of these 21 skills at once. We have actually found that trying to grasp the model more superficially at first and then go deeper and deeper works best. Because if you dive into the 21 skills, you will lose the bigger picture and you lose yourself in details. Now rest assured, you will get the detailed knowledge that you are looking for when you move on to the second step. The second step is that you try and recognize self-regulated learning in yourself or your students. What does it really look like? Now watch out, because once you start observing classroom practice, you will be very tempted to look at what the teacher is doing. After all, the tools and instruments the teacher is using is very interesting to you because that's something very concrete that you can later use in your own classroom practice. But wait just a bit. First, look for the examples of your students. How can you see that your students are really aware of their goals? How do you know how they are explaining their successes and failures, or how they are managing their time? What does that look like? Once you become really good at observing your students, you've got 2 advantages. First, you know where your students are at, and so it's much easier to pick the right type of support. Second, because you can observe your students, you can monitor the effectiveness of the support that you have chosen because you can actually monitor their growth. Now, once you've looked at what self-regulated learning is and you've recognized it in yourself and in your students, now it's time for the third step, and you are allowed to look at your own practice. So this third step means that you try and map out how you are currently supporting your students' self-regulated learning. What strategies are you supporting, and what strategies are perhaps less spoken about? How do you support it exactly? When do you explicitly teach what the strategy is? And when do you merely expect and remind them to use their self-regulation strategies? Once you've got this nice picture, you can move on to the next step. The next step is about collaborating with your colleagues, because as a teacher you can do quite a bit within the 4 walls of your classroom practice. But it works even better with a whole school approach. Once your entire school staff talks the same language and supports your students in the different grades and subjects, then your students can gradually become more self-regulated learners. This integrated approach works best. Well, student awareness is crucial to self-regulated learning. If you are not aware about what you think, about what you feel, and about what you do, then who's really steering you? And that this importance of self-awareness, you can see that in theory as well. We make a distinction between metacognitive skills and metacognitive knowledge. The metacognitive skills are an integral part of self-regulated learning because it refers to skills like goal setting, planning, monitoring and adjusting. Now, metacognitive knowledge is all the information and knowledge that you have with you the entire time. You use this knowledge to decide what self-regulation skill is most appropriate in a particular context. Students need to be aware of 3 different topics. First, they need to have knowledge about how learning works. Do they themselves know what the self-regulation skills are? Do they know how to set their goals? Do they have the right time management strategies? And especially, do they know what strategies work best for studying for the exam? And what other strategies work better for example, engaging in a 4-week project? Second, students also need knowledge about themselves as learners. Do they know what works best for them? Because there are some individual differences as well. I, for example, when I write a text, I am really feeling lonely when I sit behind my desk on my own. So this feeling of loneliness distracts me from writing well. Now, for many others, they probably prefer to be somewhere in an isolated place to write because they cannot be distracted. So try and get to know yourself as a learner. And then third, you need knowledge about the task that you are going to perform, because the better you know the task and what is expected from you, the easier it will be to self-regulate yourself while you are learning. So to sum up, the better you know what learning looks like, the better you know yourself as a learner, and the better you know the task that you are gonna do, the easier it will be to self-regulate yourself. Now, how can you as a teacher support your students' self-awareness? The first best practice that you can implement is to ask reflective questions. You can do this in whole groups, but you can also apply it in one-to-one interactions. The goal here is to make learning as visible as possible. A second good practice is that you build a shared vocabulary around self-regulated learning. Try and make sure that your school team uses the same terminology when they talk about self-regulation skills. This way your students can gradually build their knowledge about self-regulated learning, and you can try as a school team to implement both horizontal and vertical lines. Horizontal lines mean that you actually support self-regulation throughout the different subjects. The vertical lines mean that you support self-regulated learning throughout the school career of your students. Now, a third example is, and I see this being implemented in many schools lately, is that you match your students with a learning coach, or you organize learning hubs. And the learning hub is just a group of students that come together regularly with their mentor to just talk about learning. Now, this is a great way to ensure that you invest time and effort in building your students' metacognitive knowledge. Then, as a final example, many students could benefit from mindfulness training, because mindfulness trains the mind to self-observe what you're feeling, doing, and thinking.